Our next speaker, ladies and gentlemen, and our first speaker for this afternoon is Nandan Nilekani. Ladies and gentlemen, the co-founder and chairman of Ek Step, which is a not-for-profit effort to create a learner-centric technology-based platform that helps improve basic literacy and numeracy for millions of children. He was most recently the chairman of the Unique Identification Authority of India, UDAI, in the rank of a cabinet minister. He was previously the co-chairman at Infosys Technologies Limited, which he co-founded in the year 1981. The Fortune magazine conferred him with the Asia's Businessman of the Year award in the year 2003. In the year 2005, he received the prestigious Joseph Schumpeter Prize for Innovative Services in Economy, Economic Sciences, and Politics. In the year 2006, he was awarded the Padma Bhushan, and the Times magazine listed him as one of the 100 most influential people in the world in the year 2006 and 2009. The Foreign Policy magazine listed him as one of the top 100 global thinkers in the year 2010. Nandan Nilekani is the author of Imagining India and has also co-authored his second book with Viral Shah, Rebooting India, Realizing a Billion Aspiration. Ladies and gentlemen, please, with a loud, warm round of applause, please welcome on stage Mr. Nilekani. Welcome, sir.
Hi.
A very, very good afternoon. The stage is yours.
Thank you very much. Thank you all, and it's really wonderful to be here at the IAA World Congress, and I'm happy to be speaking right after lunch. So let me speak about the topic I chose for today was the Aadhaar leapfrog, which is about how India used digital technology to leapfrog on many fronts. It was exactly 10 years back, a decade back, that I was invited by the then Prime Minister, Dr. Manmohan Singh, to come to Delhi and join the government and implement this project to give 1 billion people a digital identity. Now, this was a long way from my office, which is a corner office overlooking a golf course in Bangalore, to leave all that and go to Delhi to see how to give 1 billion people a digital ID. Now, you may be wondering, why did we even need to do this? And there were really two big reasons for this project to give everyone a digital identity. The first was that in the last 15 years, India was building a welfare state. India was rolling out pensions, scholarships, unemployment insurance, healthcare, and many other benefits, all of which were being funded from the budget, from the government's tax collections, and all of them were meant for individuals. And then they began to realize that the underlying way of identifying a person and making sure that he or she was the right beneficiary was actually becoming difficult because people didn't have any form of identification. Now, the reason for this, again, goes back to the fact that in India, our birth registration systems are not really up to par. And in many Indian states, more than 50% of the births the children don't have a birth certificate for a variety of reasons. And therefore, you have lots of people growing up without an identity which they can use. And in the old days, when people lived their entire life in the same village, it probably didn't matter that they didn't have a birth certificate because everybody could identify them. But in an increasingly mobile world, an increasingly aspirational world where people are leaving the village, coming to the cities, people are moving from north to south, from east to west, being able to prove who you are or having an identity becomes very, very important. So the first reason for this project was if we are going to give billions of dollars of benefits to people, we have to make sure it goes to the right person. So we must have a very unambiguous way of identifying who the person is. So that was the government's desire from the point of view of improving the quality of its distribution of benefits. And the second thing was that there were 1 billion people, many of them without an ID. They were going to be mobile. They were moving into big cities. They wanted to open a bank account, get a mobile connection, get a job, get into the train, catch a flight. how do they prove who they are? So these are the two big reasons for the need to create an identity of this type. And the challenge we had was we had millions of people, maybe hundreds of millions of people, who didn't have any document to say who they were. And we had to make sure that everybody got only one ID in the new system. And that's why it's called a unique ID. But the challenge is, how do you ensure somebody is unique when you don't have a way of proving who they are? And that's why we came to the conclusion that the only way to establish uniqueness was through what's called as biometric deduplication. In other words, everybody has a unique biometric signature, and no two people have the same biometric signature as long as you have enough data points, and therefore you can establish that somebody is unique. And for the purpose of this project, we established uniqueness in three ways. We looked at fingerprints, we looked at the iris of both the eyes, and we had a photograph. And therefore, between these three things, everybody could be unique. And therefore, we made sure that everybody got only one number. Now, the actual technology to do this is incredibly complex. Just to give an idea of the scale of what we are doing, if we had 500 million people IDs in our database and 1 million new people entered or enrolled into the system, that was 500 trillion computer matches that had to be done to establish whether the person was unique or not. Because everyone who was enrolled, his biometrics had to be compared against all the 500 million we had to see whether he or she had already entered the system under some other name or whatever. And therefore, it was a very complex system. It had thousands of computer servers at the back and so on. And it was built at that time very differently. It was built in what is now called, now it's well known, which is open source software. It's the same kind of software which powers Google or Facebook. And using open source software, we could build a system for a population scale of 1 billion people. So we also had to build a system where we could enroll a large number of people very quickly. And therefore, our enrollment system was designed for 1.5 million people a day. In other words, 1.5 million people around the country could enroll into the system. And at peak, we had 35,000 enrollment stations where people were enrolling every day. And that's how we were able to reach 600 million people in the first 5 years. And today, the government has 1.2 billion people on this platform. And therefore, it's the world's largest digital ID platform. I had made a commitment when I joined the government that I would be there till we reach 600. We reached 600 in 4.5 years, after which I quit the government, but the project continued. There was a change in government, the project continued, so it kept going forward. Now, why is this so important, and why is it important, and why is it that we can do this in India? First, we have to realize that in some sense, in a country like India, where there's no technology, it's actually an advantage, because you can leapfrog. You can straight away go to the latest generation of technology, but you don't have the baggage of older systems. And identity was one clear area where we didn't have any baggage, because many people didn't have the proper IDs. And therefore, we were able to straight away leapfrog into this modern system. And when we designed this system, we designed it for multiple purposes. The first, of course, was to make sure that you could identify yourself, and to identify yourself online in a digital way on the cloud. And we call that an online authentication. And this system is designed to do billions of, maybe 100 million authentications a day. And currently, in the last couple of years, every month, there have been 1 billion authentications, which means 1 billion times somebody went somewhere and gave his number and said, this is to prove who I am. So that's the scale of what's happening. It's also the basis for what's called as know your customer. And know your customer is important because when you want to open a bank account, get a mobile connection, get an insurance policy, buy a mutual fund, first question they ask is, prove who you are. It's called know your customer. And what we did using the Aadhaar system, we built an electronic know your customer where you can verify and make sure the person is the right person as well as get his basic details in 2 minutes. And using the KY, it's called eKYC, you're able to open bank accounts and mobile connections rapidly. And in fact, Mr. Ambani, who's the chair of the organizing committee here, used this very successfully in Jio because they could enroll millions of customers very quickly using this Aadhaar eKYC. And then we also built a cash transfer system. Again, today the big debate in India and around the world is UBI, Universal Basic Income, direct benefits. How do we make sure that, there's this whole program to give farmers 6,000 rupees a month, 6,000 rupees a year in India, 500 rupees a month. All that requires a very accurate and pilfer-proof way of transferring money into people's bank accounts. So we built that system too, and we connected the ID system to the banking system so that everybody could connect the two things. And today we have about 900 million bank accounts in India which are linked to the ID, about 600 million unique people to the ID. And using this ID linked to a bank account, the government is able to transfer benefits to everybody electronically in near real time. In other words, somebody somewhere in the pension department says, this person is entitled to 1,000 rupees. You just enter the details and the money goes electronically by using the ID. The ID goes to the bank account and so on. And because of this system, which again is built on the latest technology, we have got the world's largest cash transfer system in the world, which does billions of transactions since inception. So these are all large-scale, population-scale interventions which have changed the way India works. And this is something which is very, very important. Now, let me, since this is a group of people in the advertising, marketing, and branding business, let me talk about a couple of things. How did we select the name Aadhaar? And this was a very thoughtful choice we had to make. We had to find a word which was ubiquitous, a word which worked in every Indian language, or at least most Indian languages, and a word which conveyed what we wanted to do. And Aadhaar means foundation. And we said that identity is the foundation of life, because unless people can recognize who you are, unless you can prove who you are, you really can't get much done. And therefore, we came up with the concept of Aadhaar as the foundation. And we got this word, and I'm sorry to tell you, we didn't go to any agency for this. We actually got this word because we went around the country explaining this concept. And in one of these conversations with a person somewhere in North India, they said, they used the word Aadhaar, and we said, yes, that's it. Aadhaar is the word to describe what we are doing. Similarly, we had a very good logo. Our logo is now very well known. Again, no agency, I'm sorry again. We had a contest. We had a lot of people across the country submitting, and we selected the best thing. So, we are government. We have to do it cheap. So we had to, so we got both the brand, the name, as well as the logo on the cheap. So I think fundamentally, this was how we set up the whole thing. But we also realized that how do we, our challenge was how do we get 1 billion people to subscribe to this? How do you do that? How do you get 1 billion people to subscribe? But one thing we realized as we did the market research and analyzed the whole thing is that there was a lot of demand for identity. People were saying that they need an ID. And we realized that we really had a product or an offering which could go viral. And that's exactly what happened, because when we started doing the enrollments, and we did them in Jharkhand, in Rajasthan, all over the place, we had queues of people lining up to get the ID. And as somebody in the queue said, when the government is giving something free, why shouldn't you take it? So, the mentality was, okay, you're getting one more thing from the government, you must take it. So I think, in fact, I had a MP staying next to me in Delhi who said, when is my Aadhaar coming? Because he said, I'm getting something, so I better, better to get it. So fundamentally, we found that there was a huge pent-up demand, and we were able to create, we were able to get to this 1 million a day quite easily without really doing a lot of branding or advertising, but just by word of mouth. The other important thing was the way we thought about designing it. Very often what happens in many systems, it's not designed from the user perspective. It's designed from the other side, from the producer perspective. But our entire thinking and thinking was how to make it simple for the user. And therefore, we kept the enrollment very, very simple. The enrollment could be done in 10 to 15 minutes. It was very simple information. We distributed a kit, a software kit and a hardware kit. So everywhere in the country, the enrollment was done exactly in the same way. So it was standardized through a software kit which could be rolled out by enrollment agencies. And we said, how do we make it convenient so that somebody can enroll anytime, anywhere? Because we had to make sure that we were respectful of people's time and their ability to go somewhere. And this was, so suppose there is somebody from Bihar who's working in Delhi, and the only time that she has to do enrollment is 3 in the afternoon, she should be able to go somewhere and enroll. And the whole thing is flipped around to make it convenient for people to enroll anytime, anywhere. And that's a very important design consideration when you're designing for 1 billion people, that you make it as easy to use. But this actually meant that the back end became very complicated because we made the front end easy. We made the user interface, the user sort of experience very simple, but the back end became incredibly complicated because we were receiving millions of enrollments from across the country, and we had to make sure that they were technologically sorted out so that nobody had a duplicate number. So the key thing we realized in doing all this design is that hide the complexity from the user, but make it very good, make it, you can do all the sophistication inside the system, but make it very simple for the user and use design principles to make life easier. So this became actually part of a number of things we did later. You could, as I said, now that we are 1.2 billion people, we designed it in a way that many organizations could use it, not just the government, and therefore that's how the banks used it, the mobile companies used it, and this actually became a very big case, as you're aware, in the Indian Supreme Court. So the Indian Supreme Court had a very large series of cases about Aadhaar, whether Indians have the fundamental right to privacy. Then we had a 9-judge bench which said that yes, Indians have a fundamental right to privacy, but the state can constrain that for 4 reasons: for law and order, for national security, the distribution of benefits, and for protection of revenue. And they have to do it through a law, and it should be appropriate and reasonable. And then the Aadhaar case itself was tested against the government's statement on the fundamental right to privacy, and it was upheld about 6 months back. And so that sort of put the case to rest. And this was such an important case that the hearing on the Aadhaar case is the second longest case running in the Indian Supreme Court. In other words, it took so many hearings to get to where we are. But what is happening is that this is now leading to other things. And another big thing that digital leapfrog that India has done is something called UPI, or Unified Payment Interface. That's a payment system developed by India's National Payment Corporation. Again, a very successful payment system, any mobile phone, any bank account, to any mobile phone, any bank account. And as you know, that's growing very rapidly. Just last month, the system did about 670 million transactions, should hit 1 billion transactions in about 6 months. And this is also about how to make India more digital in payments, how to reduce the amount of cash in the economy and have more digital payments. But most importantly, also what this ID system is doing is allowing us to create a new paradigm of data. If you think about how data is there in the world, we think there are broadly 4 models of data. The US model has been let the markets flourish, and you're seeing the growth, you know it very well, the rise of digital advertising aggregators which dominate the market. And now there's a lot of concern in the US about fake news, about meddling by foreign powers in elections, about all kinds of things. And so you're seeing some kind of a pushback on this. But fundamentally, the US model on data has been fairly liberal in the way that people can accumulate data. The European model is more conservative, and the focus is on reducing harm. And that's what led the Europeans to create the GDPR, General Data Protection Regulations, which launched about a year back on May 25th of last year. But there the focus is on how to make sure that people's data is protected. It's really a defensive kind of an approach. The third approach is the Chinese approach, where the state sees data as very important and it's used for a variety of things to maintain law and order and all kinds of things. And I believe that the Indian approach to data is the fourth approach, which is how do we use data for empowering people. In other words, the thesis is that the West, when internet and computers came, people were already financially rich. And therefore, the business models that emerged were those that could sell to them, which is why advertising and so on became such a big thing on the internet, which led to the rise of Google and Facebook and Amazon and so on. But in India, people are going to be data rich before they're economically well off. In other words, whether the person is in the US with a per capita income of $50,000, whether the person is in Bihar with a per capita income of $2,000, the digital footprint they generate, because they're all using the same devices, is going to be very similar. And therefore, when we have a society where people are digitally rich before they are economically well off, the business models that will emerge are fundamentally going to be different. It's going to be those business models that enable people to use their data to get better services. They use their data to get a better loan, or better healthcare, or better education, or better jobs, or better products, or whatever it is. And therefore, the Indian model of data empowerment actually flips it around and puts the user at the center of his or own data. And this is a fundamental difference which you will see in the coming years. And the reason that we are able to do that is because of the fact that we have an ID system. So today, anybody can do an online authentication to prove that I am who I am, and then I can ask for my data from a data source and give it to somebody else and say, use my data to give me this service. For example, if I'm a small business and I want a loan, I can say, ask the income tax system to give my tax records, ask the GST system to give my indirect tax records, ask the bank to give my bank statement, and I can take all that data and give it to a lender and say, look, this is my business performance, now give me a loan. Or if I'm a consumer who wants better healthcare, I can ask the diagnostic system to give my diagnostic report, I can ask the specialist, I can ask somebody else to give my EEG, and then I can give this data to a specialist and say, what do you think is wrong with me? And therefore, the model in India, unlike elsewhere, where the data is with the business or data is with the government, in the Indian model of data, the data is going to be with themselves. And therefore, ultimately, while the ID, Aadhaar, all that help in solving one set of issues of how to make sure everybody has dignity and identity, how to make sure government expenditure is efficient and corruption is reduced, is also the basis for the next transformation, which is how do people get empowered with the data. And I think over the next few years, you will see those kind of applications. And then you'll see the power of platforms for government, where government enables something and then allows innovation to happen upon that. I mean, internet is a classic example of a government-built platform which has so much innovation. GPS is another government-built platform which today is the basis for maps or Ola or Uber. So when you have these large platforms that are built for innovation, all kinds of new things happen with that. So that's the story of Aadhaar. It's a leapfrog, and I believe that is something which has global implications. And today we have about 20 countries around the world who are looking at something similar. And there's a massive initiative across the World Bank, the United Nations, the Gates Foundation, Omidyar Foundation, Soros Foundation. Everybody is working together to see how we can take the message of digital identity worldwide in the next 10 years. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much, sir, for highlighting this entire journey of Aadhaar. But before we ask you to take your seat comfortably in the audience, we've got some really interesting questions from the audience, and if I may ask them to you.
Sure.
So, with 5 likes, how good is the security of digital Aadhaar data, and what will we do if it is leaked?
No, I think this is a very important question, and I think we are all, everybody is involved with the design of the system, is very conscious of the fact that this system has data of 1.2 billion people. The demographic information is pretty standard. It's name, address, date of birth, sex, email ID, and phone number. But the biometric data is particularly sensitive. And therefore, a lot of effort has gone into the design of this so that it's not used for any other purpose except for authentication. And authentication is something available only as a set of standard ways of doing things. And the actual data is kept very much, it's not on the internet, it's kept very far out. And a lot of other—
In the cloud.
Huh?
In the cloud.
No, it's not in the cloud, actually. Good one, but it's not in the cloud. So it's somewhere else. Let's say it's deep in some mine or something, yeah. So, so I think the basic system is very safe, but absolutely we cannot be complacent. And I think everybody is focused on making sure that we continue to guard it very, very zealously.
But what if it is leaked? But what if it is leaked?
No,
like
I think—
if, because we can ask.
Well, I think, we're assuming it won't be leaked.
Okay. We'll believe you.
And it's our job to make sure it's not leaked.
Okay. Having had the most complex of technologies to implement Aadhaar, okay, this is a very serious question, sir. I think it's even more important than the previous one. Why is the picture on my Aadhaar card not even recognizable by my mother?
What's that? What's that?
Why is the picture on my Aadhaar card not even recognizable by my mother?
Well, actually, the biggest request I get, especially from women, is can I change my photograph on my Aadhaar card?
Portrait mode, please.
And in fact, you can, by the way, you can go to an enrollment center and update the photograph. You remember that, first of all, I think when we started 10 years back,
right,
the resolution of cameras was not as good as it is today. And price was a big thing for our enrollment agents and so on. A lot of issues. Plus, these photographs are taken in all kinds of ambient conditions that are not perfect. They're not taken in a studio. They're taken out there, in a field or something. So yes, I think in some cases, but you can do one thing actually. When you enroll, you could have asked
Sir, this is not my question. You can go change your photo.
But I think people can change their photo, and that's the best way to go forward.
Thank you, sir. Why are we using such personal information for private company verification? How much information does a company gain while we share our eKYC?
No, that's again a great question. And the question came from the worry that if we allow private companies to use Aadhaar for authentication and they get the Aadhaar number, and then what happens? So in fact, the design of the Aadhaar system has a very important concept called tokenization. And basically, while you use Aadhaar number for verification, the private company by law will not be allowed to store the number. They will actually store a garbled version of it. So they actually don't get to store the number.
Oh, so like an encrypted version.
Yeah, it's tokenized, but yeah.
Okay.
It's also encrypted.
UIDAI has issued the Aadhaar card post due diligence to the public of India. Then why does the government of India mull about implementing NRC in Assam? Rather, they should consider Aadhaar holders as a bona fide Indian. What's your opinion on this?
No, I think it's important to realize that when the Aadhaar project was conceived, it was not a citizenship ID. It was just an ID for a resident. So possession of Aadhaar does not mean that you're a citizen or not. And whether you're a citizen or not is a separate process that is done by the Home Ministry of India. So we were very clear that Aadhaar just said that X is X, Kubra is Kubra, that's it.
I like the sound of that. Kubra is Kubra. Thank you very, very much for answering our questions. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm going to request Mr. Srinivasan Swamy to kindly come on stage and present a token of appreciation to Mr. Nilekani. Thank you, sir. You've been very gracious to answer our questions. A louder round of applause, ladies and gentlemen, the first afternoon speaker. Thank you, sir. Kubra is Kubra, Swamy sir is Swamy sir.